The year was 2347, and humanity believed they were alone in the universe. They had spread across 12 star systems. They had built cities on distant worlds. They had created ships that could travel faster than light. For 300 years, humans looked at the stars and saw only empty space waiting to be explored. They were wrong. The ship appeared above Earth on a Tuesday morning. It was not like any human ship. It was the size of a small moon, and it blocked out the sun over half of Europe. People stopped in the streets and looked up. Some screamed. Some prayed. Most just stood there with their mouths open, unable to understand what they were seeing. Admiral Helena Vance was in her office when the call came. She was 53 years old, with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen too many battles. She had fought pirates in the outer colonies. She had put down rebellions on Mars. She thought she had seen everything the universe could offer. She was also wrong. "Admiral," her aide said, his voice shaking, "they want to talk." The aliens called themselves the Galactic Concord. There were 3 species. They were tall and thin, with bodies like insects and minds that could read thoughts. The Dominion were beings made of pure energy, glowing like small suns. The Imperium were massive reptiles with scales like armor and teeth like knives. They had ruled the galaxy for 100,000 years. They controlled thousands of star systems. They had technology that made human science look like children playing with toys. And they wanted to meet. Admiral Vance was chosen to represent humanity. She traveled to the Concord Station, a structure so large that it made Earth look like a marble. The station sat at the center of the galaxy, and ships from 1,000 worlds came and went like bees around a hive. Vance walked into the great hall where the tribunal would take place. The ceiling was so high she could not see it. The walls were covered with gold and jewels from worlds she had never heard of. Representatives from hundreds of species filled the seats, all watching her with curious eyes. She felt very small. The 3 rulers sat on thrones at the front of the hall. The ambassador was named Ra. Her compound eyes reflected Vance like 1,000 tiny mirrors. The representative was called the Burning One, and looking at him for too long hurt Vance's eyes. The warlord was Or, and he was the largest living thing Vance had ever seen. "So," Ra said, her voice echoing in Vance's mind like a whisper, "these are the humans we have heard about, the little species that learned to walk among the stars." Vance stood straight. "We come in peace. We wish to join the Galactic Concord as equal members." The hall was silent for a moment. Then Or laughed. It was a horrible sound like rocks grinding together. Soon, all 3 rulers were laughing, and the representatives in the seats joined them. Vance's face burned with shame, but she did not move. "Equal members," Or said when he finally stopped laughing. "Little mammal, you have 12 systems. 12. I have more ships than you have planets." "Your technology is primitive," the Burning One added. His voice crackled like fire. "Your weapons are toys. Your ships are metal coffins waiting to become tombs." Ra leaned forward. "We have watched your kind for some time now. You are amusing in your way, like small animals learning to use tools, but you are not ready to sit with the great powers of the galaxy." "Then what are we?" Vance asked. Her voice did not shake, though her hands did. "You will be given observer status," Ra said. "You may watch, you may learn. Perhaps in another 1,000 years you will be ready for more." "And if we refuse?" Or smiled, showing rows of teeth. "Then we will give you protected species status instead. We will take care of you, feed you, keep you safe." He paused. "Like pets." The hall laughed again. Vance wanted to scream. She wanted to fight. But she was one human in a room full of beings who could destroy her world with a thought, so she did the only thing she could do. She bowed her head and accepted. The journey home was long. Vance sat alone in her cabin and stared at the stars passing by. She thought about the laughter. She thought about being called primitive, being called a pet. She thought about the look in Or's eyes when he smiled at her. She thought about what they did not know. Deep in the files of Earth's government, there was a project that did not exist. It had no name on any public record. The people who worked on it did not tell their families what they did. The money that paid for it came from accounts that no one could trace. It was called Project Leviathan. For 50 years, humanity's greatest minds had worked in secret. They studied alien technology from crashed ships and stolen data. They built things that should have been impossible. They created weapons that no one in the galaxy had ever imagined. And they waited. When Vance returned to Earth, she went straight to the president's office. The room was full of generals and admirals and politicians, all talking at once about the insult humanity had suffered. "We should negotiate," someone said. "Perhaps in time they will accept us." "We should hide," another voice called out. "Stay quiet and hope they forget about us." "We should surrender now and hope for good treatment." Vance listened to them argue for an hour. Then she stood up. "I have another idea," she said. The room went quiet. "Project Leviathan," Vance said. "It's time." The president looked at her for a long moment. "Are you sure? Once we reveal what we have, there is no going back." Vance thought about the laughter. She thought about being called primitive. "They think we are children playing with fire," she said. "Let them keep thinking that for now. But the day will come when they see what we really are, and on that day they will not laugh." The president nodded slowly. "Very well, begin the preparations, but we do not move until we must." Vance saluted and left the room. Outside, she looked up at the night sky. Somewhere out there, 3 ancient species were celebrating their easy victory over the primitive humans. They were probably already forgetting about the little mammals from the small planet called Earth. That was their first mistake. They thought humanity was weak because they were young. They thought humanity was harmless because they were small. They looked at human ships and saw primitive technology. They did not see what was hidden in the dark spaces between stars. They did not see the shipyards built into asteroids and hidden in the clouds of gas giants. They did not see the weapons being tested in the empty void where no one could hear the explosions. They saw what humanity wanted them to see. And that was exactly the plan. Vance smiled for the first time since the tribunal. The smile was cold and hard, like steel in winter. "Laugh while you can," she whispered to the stars. "Your time is coming." Somewhere in the cloud, in the cold darkness at the edge of the solar system, lights began to turn on. Machines that had been sleeping for decades started to wake up. Metal began to move, and shapes began to form in the blackness. Project Leviathan was ready. Now humanity just needed a reason to use it. They would not have to wait long. 6 months passed after the tribunal. Humanity accepted their observer status and stayed quiet. They watched the galactic conquered from a distance. They learned how the 3 ruling species operated. They studied their ships, their weapons, and their tactics. And they waited. The Imperium grew bored first. Warlord or sat on his throne and thought about the little humans who had dared to ask for equal membership. The memory made him angry. How dare such weak creatures think they deserve to stand beside the... They need to learn their place, or said to his generals. They need to understand what happens to species who do not show proper respect. "What do you suggest, my lord?" one general asked. Or smiled his terrible smile. "I suggest we go hunting." The first attacks came without warning. Raiding parties appeared in human space like ghosts. They struck small colonies on the frontier, places far from Earth and far from help. They burned homes and killed families. They took prisoners and made them fight each other for entertainment. To them, it was sport. Humans were not people to them. Humans were prey. The reports came back to Earth, each one worse than the last. Admiral Vance read them all. She saw pictures of burning cities and crying children. She saw videos of warriors holding human heads like trophies. Her hands shook with rage, but she did not act. Not yet. "We should contact the Conquered," one advisor said. "They must stop this." Vance shook her head. "I already tried. They said it is an internal matter. We are not members, so we have no protection." "Then what do we do?" "We wait," Vance said. "We wait for the right moment." That moment came 3 months later, on a world called New Carthage. New Carthage was a beautiful planet. It had green fields and blue oceans and cities filled with 2.3 million people. Most of them were farmers. They grew food that fed a dozen other colonies. They had no weapons except hunting rifles. They had no warships except 12 small frigates and 2 old cruisers. They had no chance. The battle group appeared in orbit on a Sunday morning. There were 50 warships, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built. They did not send a warning. They did not ask for surrender. They just started shooting. Captain Maria Santos commanded the human defense fleet. She was young, only 32, but she had trained her whole life for this moment. She knew her ships could not win. She knew she was going to die. She attacked anyway. "All ships engage the enemy," she said into her communicator. "Make them pay for every inch of space." The battle lasted 47 minutes. Human ships fired everything they had. They rammed vessels when their weapons ran empty. They fought until every last ship was destroyed. They killed 3 cruisers, just 3. Captain Santos died with her hand on her weapon controls, still fighting. On the planet below, landed their troops. They went from city to city, killing everyone they found. They burned the fields and poisoned the water. They recorded everything and broadcast it across human space. "This is what happens to primitives who forget their place," Or said in his message. "Watch and learn, little mammals. Watch and learn." 2.3 million people died on New Carthage. Men, women, and children. Farmers and teachers and doctors. All of them gone in a single day. The news reached Earth at midnight. President watched the footage in silence. Her face was pale and her eyes were wet with tears. Around her, advisors argued about what to do. "We must surrender," one said. "We cannot fight them." "We must hide our people in the outer systems," another suggested. "We must beg the Conquered for help." Admiral Vance stood in the corner, watching and listening. When the arguments finally stopped, she stepped forward. "There is another option," she said. Everyone turned to look at her. "Project Leviathan is complete," Vance continued. "We have 24 ships ready to launch, ships unlike anything the galaxy has ever seen." 24 ships, the defense minister laughed bitterly. "They have thousands. What can 24 ships do?" Vance looked at him with cold eyes. "Would you like to find out?" President was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked, "What exactly did Project Leviathan build, Admiral?" Vance pulled up a hologram. The room went silent. The ship in the image was 5 kilometers long. It was covered with weapons that had no names in any Conquered database. Its engines glowed with a light that seemed wrong somehow, like looking at a star through broken glass. "We call it a Dreadnought," Vance said. "It carries weapons that can destroy moons. Its armor can survive a direct hit from anything they have. Its engines can travel faster and further than any ship in the Conquered fleet." "How?" someone whispered. "How did we build this?" Vance smiled slightly. "They gave us observer status. They let us watch their ships, their technology, their tactics. They thought we were too primitive to understand what we were seeing." She paused. "They were wrong. We understood everything, and then we made it better." The vote was unanimous. Project Leviathan was authorized for deployment. 3 days later, Admiral Vance stood on the bridge of the UES Wrath of Terra. It was the lead ship of the Dreadnought fleet. Through the viewport, she could see the other 23 ships forming up around her. They were beautiful and terrible at the same time. Each one was a machine built for one purpose: to destroy anything that threatened humanity. "Admiral," her communications officer said, "all ships report ready." Vance nodded. She thought about New Carthage. She thought about Captain Santos dying with her hands on the controls. She thought about 2.3 million people who would never see another sunrise. "Set course for Prime," she said. "Maximum speed." "Ma'am, that's there. They will have their entire fleet there." "I know," Vance said. "I'm counting on it." The Dreadnought fleet entered faster than light travel. Their engines made no sound that Concord sensors could detect. Their ships left no trail that enemy scouts could follow. They moved through the galaxy like ghosts, like shadows, like death itself coming to collect a debt. Or sat on his throne on Prime, celebrating his victory over the humans. He watched the footage from New Carthage again and again, laughing at the screaming and the dying. He did not know that 24 ships were coming for him. He did not know that everything was about to change. He would learn soon enough. They all would. Prime was a fortress. The planet was surrounded by defense stations the size of cities. 800 warships patrolled its orbit day and night. Ground batteries could shoot down anything that came too close. For 10,000 years, no enemy had ever threatened the warlord or stood at his window and looked out at his fleet with pride. He was the most powerful being in his corner of the galaxy. No one could touch him. No one would dare try. His advisor rushed into the room. "My lord, sensors detect ships approaching." "Ships from where?" "We do not know. They appeared from nowhere. Our sensors did not see them until they were almost here." Or frowned. "How many?" The advisor looked at his data pad. 24, my lord." Or stared at him for a moment. Then he laughed. The laugh echoed through the throne room like thunder. 24 ships against 800. Against Prime itself." He shook his head. "The humans are even more stupid than I thought. Let them come. We will destroy them and use their bones to decorate my walls." The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. Admiral Vance stood on the bridge of the Wrath of Terra and looked at the enemy formation on her screens. 807 warships, her tactical officer reported. 42 defense stations, planetary shields at full power. "Good," Vance said. "I was hoping for a challenge." Her crew looked at her like she was crazy. 24 ships against more than 800. The math did not work. The odds were impossible. But they had seen what their ships could do in testing. They had watched weapons tear through asteroids like paper. They had seen shields hold against attacks that should have destroyed them. They believed in their admiral, and they believed in their ships. "All hands battle stations," Vance said. Her voice was calm and steady. "Weapons free, target the nearest defense station." The Wrath of Terra's main weapon was called a singularity cannon. It created a small black hole and fired it at the enemy. Nothing could stop it. Nothing could survive it. Vance gave the order, "Fire." The cannon discharged with a sound like reality itself screaming. A ball of pure darkness shot across space faster than the eye could follow. It hit the defense station directly in the center. The station did not explode. It simply stopped existing. One moment it was there. The next moment it was gone, sucked into a point of infinite gravity and crushed into nothing. Across the fleet, every sensor and every screen showed the same thing. "Impossible, impossible, impossible." Or stopped laughing. "What was that?" he demanded. "What kind of weapon was that?" No one could answer him. Nothing in the Concord database matched what they had just seen. The humans had built something new, something terrible. "All ships attack," or roared, "destroy them now." The fleet surged forward. 800 warships opened fire at once. The space around the human fleet filled with energy beams and missiles and projectiles. It was enough firepower to destroy a small moon. The human dreadnoughts flew straight into it. Weapons hit human shields and did nothing. The shields were made of energy that adapted and changed. Each hit made them stronger instead of weaker. They had never seen anything like it. "Our weapons are not working. A captain screamed into his communicator. "They are not working." The human ships returned fire. Their weapons were not like anything they had faced before. Missiles that thought for themselves, changing course to chase their targets. Energy beams that cut through armor like it was made of cloth. Electromagnetic pulses that shut down enemy ships and left them floating dead in space. The battle was not a fight, it was a slaughter. Ships exploded by the dozens, then by the hundreds. Captains who had never known fear screamed for help as their vessels came apart around them. The greatest fleet in the Imperium was being torn to pieces by 24 ships. Admiral Vance watched the destruction with cold eyes. She did not smile. She did not cheer. She thought about New Carthage. She thought about the children who died there. "This is for them," she whispered. After 4 hours, it was over. 600 warships were destroyed. The rest had fled or surrendered. All 42 defense stations were gone. The planetary shields had failed under the assault. The human fleet had lost 0 ships. Vance opened a channel to Prime. Her face appeared on every screen on the planet. In homes and military bases and government buildings, everyone saw the human admiral looking down at them. "This is Admiral Helena Vance of the United Earth Navy," she said. "You attacked our people. You killed 2.3 million innocent civilians. You broadcast their deaths like entertainment." She paused, letting her words sink in. "I could destroy your world right now. I have weapons that could crack your planet in half. I could kill billions of your people in the time it takes you to blink." On Prime, people began to panic. Millions ran for shelters that would not protect them. Soldiers dropped their weapons and prayed to gods they had never believed in. Or stood frozen at his window, watching the human ships floating where his mighty fleet used to be. "But I am not like you," Vance continued. "Humans do not kill innocents for sport. We do not murder children for entertainment. We are better than that." She leaned forward, her eyes hard as stone. "You have 1 solar cycle to return every human prisoner you have taken, every single one, alive and unharmed. If even 1 person is missing, I will come back, and next time I will not be so kind." The transmission ended. On Prime, the government moved faster than it had ever moved before. Prison camps were opened. Slave markets were raided. Humans who had been taken in raids were gathered and put on transport ships. Within 12 hours, every human prisoner was returned. Or watched the transport ships leave his world. His hands were shaking. His mighty empire had been humbled in a single day. His fleet was gone. His pride was destroyed. And somewhere in the back of his mind, he realized something terrible. The humans had shown mercy. They had the power to destroy everything he had built, and they chose not to use it. That made them more dangerous than any enemy he had ever faced. Across the galaxy, the news spread like fire. The Galactic Conquered watched recordings of the battle again and again. They analyzed every weapon, every tactic, every impossible technology. They discussed what they had seen in voices that crackled with fear. The primitives had won. The mammals who played with fire had burned the mightiest military power in the Imperium to the ground. And everyone knew that this was only the beginning. Admiral Vance brought her fleet home. When the ships entered Earth orbit, millions of people came out to cheer. They had seen the battle. They had watched their navy do the impossible. But Vance did not celebrate. She knew what was coming next. The 3 ruling species would not accept this defeat. They would not allow humanity to challenge their power. They would come together, forget their old rivalries, and unite against the common enemy. War was coming, a war bigger than anything humanity had ever faced. And they had to be ready. The Galactic Conquered had not called an emergency session in 10,000 years. There had been no need. The 3 ruling species controlled everything. Nothing happened in the galaxy without their permission. Nothing threatened their power. Until now. The great hall on Concord Station was filled with representatives from 1,000 worlds. They whispered to each other in 100 different languages. They had all seen the recordings from Prime. They had all watched the impossible happen. The three rulers sat on their thrones, but they did not look proud anymore. Ra's compound eyes were dark with worry. The burning one flickered like a candle in the wind, or Scales had turned pale and his hands would not stop shaking. "This is a disaster," Ra said. Her telepathic voice echoed in every mind in the hall. "The humans have made fools of us all." "They made fools of the burning one corrected. His voice crackled with heat. "Perhaps if or had not been so eager to hunt primitives, we would not be in this situation." Or slammed his fist on his throne. "Do not blame me, we all laughed at them, we all called them primitive, none of us saw this coming." "That is exactly the problem," Ra said. "We did not see them as a threat. We watched them for centuries and saw only a young species taking its first steps into space. We never imagined they could develop technology beyond our own." "How did they do it?" a representative from the audience called out. "How did they build weapons we have never seen?" Ra's voice was bitter when she answered. "We gave them observer status. We let them watch our ships, our technology, our tactics. We thought they were too primitive to understand." She paused. "They understood everything. They learned from us, and then they improved on what they learned." The hall was silent for a long moment. "What do we do now?" the burning one asked. "We cannot let this stand. If we show weakness, every minor species in the galaxy will think they can challenge us." "We must destroy them," Or said, "completely, before they can build more ships." "The tried to destroy them," the burning one reminded him. "You lost 600 warships." "I lost 600 warships to 24 human ships," Or growled. "But there are 3 of us. If we combine our forces, we will have 12,000 warships. Even the humans cannot stand against that." Ra nodded slowly. "For once the warlord speaks sense. Alone we might fail, together we cannot lose." The burning one was quiet for a moment. "We have not fought together in 50,000 years. Our peoples do not trust each other." "Then we must learn to trust each other again," Ra said. "The alternative is to let the humans grow stronger. In 10 years they might have 200 dreadnoughts instead of 24. In 50 years they might have thousands. We must act now, while we still have the advantage of numbers." The vote was taken. For the first time in 50,000 years, the 3 ruling species agreed to unite their fleets. Every ship they had would gather for a single massive attack on human space. The target was the Sol system, Earth itself. Far away on Earth, Admiral Vance received a message from a source she did not name. The message contained everything: the Concord's plans, their fleet numbers, their attack routes. Humanity had spies everywhere. When you were seen as primitive and harmless, people did not watch what they said around you. They did not guard their secrets. They talked freely, never knowing that someone was always listening. Vance read the message and smiled. It was not a happy smile. "They are coming," she said to President. 12,000 ships from all 3 species. They will attack Sol in 2 months. The president's face went pale. 12,000. We only have 24 dreadnoughts. Even with our technology, those numbers are impossible." 24 was just the beginning, Vance said. Project Leviathan was never meant to build 24 ships. It was meant to build a fleet. She pulled up a map of human space. Lights appeared across the map, in places no one had ever looked. Hidden shipyards built into asteroids. Secret factories inside gas giants. Construction facilities in the dark spaces between stars where no one ever traveled. "How many?" the president whispered. 200 dreadnoughts will be ready when they arrive," Vance said. "And something else. Something we have been saving for a moment like this." She changed the display. A new ship appeared, larger than anything they had seen before. It was 15 kilometers long, bristling with weapons that made the regular dreadnoughts look like toys. "We call it the UES Judgment," Vance said. "Its main weapon can crack a planet in half. We built it in case we ever faced an enemy that threatened our survival. And now we face exactly that enemy." "Yes." The president looked at the display for a long time. 200 dreadnoughts. A planet-killing super weapon. It should have been enough to make her feel safe. Instead, she felt afraid. Afraid of what humanity had become. Afraid of what they might have to do. "Can we win?" she asked. Vance considered the question carefully. "Yes, we can win. But winning is not the same as surviving. If we destroy the conquered fleet, we will make enemies of 3 species that have ruled the galaxy for 100,000 years. There will be no going back. And if we lose, then humanity ends. They will not show us the mercy we showed them at Prime." The president closed her eyes. When she opened them again, her face was hard with determination. "Then we will not lose," she said. "Do whatever you need to do, Admiral. Prepare our defenses. When they come for us, we will be ready." Vance saluted and left to prepare for war. The next 2 months were the busiest in human history. Ships that had been hiding in the shadows finally came into the light. The Dreadnought fleet grew larger every day as new vessels finished construction and joined the formation. On Earth, people watched the sky and waited. They knew the enemy was coming. They knew the battle would decide the fate of their entire species. Some were afraid, some were angry, but most felt something else, something they had not felt since the day of the tribunal. Pride. They had been called primitive. They had been laughed at. They had been told they were nothing more than animals playing with toys. Now they would show the galaxy what primitives could do. Admiral Vance stood on the bridge of the Wrath of Terra as the enemy fleet appeared at the edge of the solar system. 12,000 warships filled her sensors like a cloud of angry stars. Behind her, 200 dreadnoughts waited in perfect formation. And at the center of that formation, the massive shape of the Judgment cast a shadow across the void. The conquered fleet sent a message. It was Ra's voice. "Humans, you have one chance to surrender. Give up your weapons and your ships, and we will allow your species to survive as a protected class. Refuse, and we will destroy you completely." Vance opened a channel so that both fleets could hear her response. "Protected class, you mean slaves, you mean pets?" She shook her head. "We refused that offer once. Our answer has not changed." "Then you choose death." Vance smiled. "Come and try." She closed the channel and turned to her crew. "All ships battle stations. This is what we trained for. This is what we were built for." She paused, looking at the massive enemy fleet on her screen. "Today, we show them who we really are." The greatest battle in galactic history was about to begin. The Battle of Sol began at dawn, Earth time. It seemed fitting that the fight for humanity's survival would start with the rising sun. 12,000 conquered ships moved forward in a wave of death. The telepaths coordinated their forces with thoughts faster than light. The burned through space like living fire. The charged with all the fury of a wounded beast. Admiral Vance watched them come. "Hold formation," she ordered. "Let them get closer." Her captains trusted her. They did not fire as the enemy fleet closed the distance. They waited, even as conquered weapons began to hit their shields. "Closer," Vance said. "Wait for it." The conquered fleet was confident. They had overwhelming numbers. They had seen what the human ships could do, and they had prepared countermeasures. New shields, new weapons, new tactics designed specifically to fight human technology. They thought they were ready. They were wrong. "Now," Vance said, "all ships execute Pattern Omega." The human fleet moved as one. 200 dreadnoughts split into smaller groups, each one coordinated by artificial intelligence that thought faster than any organic mind could follow. They shared data at the speed of light. When one ship learned something, every ship knew it instantly. The conquered countermeasures lasted approximately 4 minutes. The human AIs analyzed them, found weaknesses, and adapted. Shields that had been designed to stop singularity cannons were hit with new weapons that no one had seen before. Formations that were supposed to trap human ships were broken apart by attacks that came from angles that should have been impossible. The battle turned into chaos. Conquered ships exploded by the hundreds as human dreadnoughts tore through their lines. The careful coordination of the three species fell apart as panic spread through their ranks. Or screamed orders at his captains, but they were dying too fast to hear him. The Burning One tried to organize a retreat, but human ships were everywhere at once. Ra reached out with her telepathy, trying to calm her forces, and found only fear and confusion. "This is impossible," she whispered. "How are they doing this?" The answer was simple. The Conquered had ruled the galaxy for 100,000 years. They had not faced a real challenge in all that time. Their technology had grown stagnant. Their tactics had not changed in centuries. Humanity had been fighting for survival since they climbed down from the trees. War was in their blood. Every generation had faced enemies that wanted to destroy them. They had learned to adapt, to improve, to find new ways to win against impossible odds. The Conquered had forgotten how to fight. Humanity had never stopped learning. After 12 hours, the Conquered fleet began to retreat. Ships fled in every direction, abandoning their formation, thinking only of escape. 8,000 vessels had been destroyed. The remaining 4,000 were damaged and demoralized. The human fleet had lost 12 dreadnoughts, 12 out of 200. And the Judgment had not fired its main weapon even once. Vance could have destroyed them all. She could have chased down every fleeing ship and turned them into dust. She could have aimed the Judgment at the Conquered station and ended the three ruling species forever. She chose not to. "All ships hold position," she ordered. "Let them go." Her tactical officer looked at her with confusion. "Admiral, we could finish them." "I know," Vance said. "That is exactly why we will not do it." The survivors of the Conquered fleet limped back to their homes. They brought stories of impossible defeat. They described human ships that seemed to know what they would do before they did it. They spoke of weapons that adapted and changed during battle. And they spoke of mercy. The humans could have destroyed everything. They did not. That fact was more terrifying than any weapon. 3 days later, the Conquered sent a message to Earth. It was not a threat this time. It was a request. They wanted to talk. The negotiations took place on neutral ground, a space station in an empty system that belonged to no one. Admiral Vance represented humanity. The three rulers came themselves, their pride broken and their power shattered. "What do you want?" Ra asked. Her voice was tired and old. "Territory, resources, the surrender of our people." Vance shook her head. "We want none of those things. We do not want to rule you. We do not want to destroy you." "Then what do you want?" "Recognition," Vance said. "We want to be members of the Galactic Conquered, equal members with the same rights and responsibilities as any other species." The three rulers exchanged looks of surprise. "That is all?" Or asked. "After everything that has happened, you only want membership?" "Not just membership," Vance continued. "We want change. The Conquered has ruled the galaxy by keeping other species down. You call them primitives. You make them protected species. You treat them like children who can never grow up." She leaned forward. "That ends now. Any species that achieves interstellar travel will be offered full membership. No more protected status. No more treating younger species like pets." The Burning One laughed, though there was no humor in it. "You would have us give up our power, our control over the galaxy." "You have already lost that power," Vance said calmly. "The question is whether you will accept change peacefully or whether we will have to force it." The message was clear. Humanity did not want to conquer the galaxy, but they would not allow the old ways to continue. The three rulers had no choice. They agreed to the terms. The treaty was signed 1 month later. Humanity became full members of the Galactic Assembly, which replaced the old Concord. Within the first year, 12 new species joined, freed from their protected status. The galaxy began to change. 10 years passed. The Galactic Assembly grew to include hundreds of species. Wars became less common as the old power structures broke down. Trade routes opened between peoples who had never been allowed to meet before. And humanity stood at the center of it all, not as conquerors but as protectors. Admiral Vance was old now. Her hair was white, and her hands were not as steady as they used to be. But she still commanded the wrath of Terra, even if she spent most of her time training young officers instead of fighting battles. One day, a ship from a new species made contact with humanity. They were small creatures, barely 3 feet tall, with big eyes and gentle voices. They had just discovered faster-than-light travel. They were afraid. Vance went to meet them personally. "We have heard stories about you," their leader said. "Stories about the humans who defeated 3 great powers. Stories about weapons that can destroy planets." The little creature trembled. "Are you going to hurt us?" Vance knelt down so she could look at the creature at eye level. "We are not going to hurt you. We are going to help you. That is what we do now." "Why, you are powerful. You could take anything you want." Vance smiled. "Power means nothing if you do not use it to protect those who cannot protect themselves. We were weak once. We were laughed at. We were called primitive. We know what it feels like to be small in a big universe." She stood up and gestured toward the stars. "Welcome to the galaxy, little friends. You are not alone anymore." On the bridge of the Wrath of Terra, a young officer watched the meeting on a screen. He turned to Vance after the new species had left. "Admiral, do you ever worry that one day some species will surpass us, that they will become stronger than humanity?" Vance looked at him with eyes that had seen everything from defeat to victory to peace. "That is the point, Lieutenant. That has always been the point. We do not protect the weak so we can stay on top. We protect them so they can grow. Maybe one day one of them will become greater than us. If that happens, it will be our greatest success." She turned to look out the viewport at the stars. Somewhere out there, 3 ancient species were learning to live in a galaxy they no longer controlled. Somewhere out there, young species were taking their first steps into the darkness. Somewhere out there, the future was waiting to be written. "They laughed at us once," Vance said softly. "They called us primitive. They said we were nothing but animals playing with fire." She smiled, and there was warmth in it now. Not the cold steel of a warrior, but the peace of someone who had found their purpose. "Now they tell stories about us, not as conquerors or tyrants, but as the species that changed everything, the primitives who looked at the stars and refused to kneel." She turned back to her crew. "That is our legacy. That is what we fight for, not power, not control, but the chance for everyone, no matter how small or weak, to reach their full potential." The Wrath of Terra turned toward home, carrying humanity's greatest warrior back to a world she had saved. Behind her, the galaxy stretched out in all its infinite possibility. The universe was vast and full of wonders, and now, thanks to humanity, everyone had a chance to explore it. That was victory, the only victory that mattered.